Everybody, please welcome Lou Champoux-Roberts to our podcast. How are you doing today, Lou?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good. Me and Luke have a few questions we'd like to ask you about just like an inner window to how the tech world works.
Awesome.
Okay, so our first question is, how did you first get involved with theater?
I've been doing theater for quite a while. Since I was in third grade, my mom wrote and directed an original musical at my old school when I was in elementary school, and so I've been doing theater since then, more on the acting side. And then when I got to high school, I discovered the amazing world of tech, and so that's kind of what my passion began, like for tech.
Oh wow, that's awesome. And then like, do you think that like, your experience through acting sort of like made you appreciate tech ever, or was it just that like you found tech and was like, oh wow, I should try this?
I think having acted before was definitely helpful because then I kind of understood more about what the actor's point of view was. And so that made me a better technician because I knew what was going on in their heads during busy moments and scene changes and all that stuff. Like I understood that. And so then I was able to use my understanding of what was kind of going on for them to enhance my technical abilities.
Now, for our listeners who might not know what exactly a stage manager is, what do they do in a high school production?
They do so much. They basically do everything. They, from the beginning of rehearsal, they run the auditions, and then after casting, they're there for the read-through, and then as soon as rehearsal starts, they're at every rehearsal all the time, getting there early, staying late. They also take blocking notes throughout the blocking process when we're just blocking stuff. And then they also take line notes as the show goes on, and they also keep track of where everything's happening at what time and who needs to be in each of the locations. And so it's definitely very complicated, but it's amazing to kind of see the whole production come together, which is also one of the joys of being stage manager, is that you're with it through the whole production, especially in high school. So calling the show and being able to think back to like the first rehearsal where it was like chaos, but then you've got this like show that's all pulled together.
Adding on to that, what would you say is your most favorite part of the job, and what's the most challenging?
I think my favorite part is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where I can like see the whole show come together, from the read through all the way to closing night. That's my favorite part because like there's not many other roles in tech where that is the whole process, like you're in it forever for the whole thing. I think the most challenging part is just like balancing it with my school responsibilities, because I am still a full-time student, and so I need to be staying on top of my homework, studying for tests and stuff, and that can be really hard, especially if I'm at rehearsal for 2 to 3 hours every day. So like finding time for homework and finding time for any outside commitments apart from theater that I have is definitely challenging.
Especially during Tech Week, right?
Speaking of Tech Week,
Yes.
can you walk us through a typical day during Tech Week?
Yeah, so we do it kind of unique here at Eastlake. Not a lot of other schools do it the same way that we do, where we have Monday is tech, Tuesday is tech, and then Wednesday is our teacher preview, and Thursday is opening night. So we really only have 2 days of tech before opening, or before we perform in front of an audience, which is definitely stressful. But on Monday, it's kind of just running the whole thing, getting all the parts put together. If there's a tech crew, introducing them and assigning jobs. And so there's a lot of starting and stopping, because there's a lot of moving parts that you have to put together, because then you add sound, you add mics, you add lights, you add tech crew, and then you have orchestra if it's a musical, and so it's a lot of moving parts that get put together. And then Tuesday is usually the time when you try and just do a run-through without stopping, because that's like Wednesday is when you perform for an invited audience, and so it's very quick.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind telling us about the most recent production you've worked on and some standout moments behind the scenes?
Yeah, the most recent production that I did tech for was Phantom Tollbooth, which was our spring play. I think I was the set designer and the fly rail op for that show, and I think
Mhm.
there were so many points that stood out to me, but one of the biggest ones was like after everything had been rigged, all of my set design had been rigged and put in the air, and then to be able to walk into rehearsal that Monday after it was all rigged and see it all like on stage, that was kind of an amazing experience for me because there really was this sense of like, wow, my design was realized and my and all the effort and work that I put into was worth something. And so I think that's pretty much the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of times in shows where things don't go especially as planned. Have you ever had a show must go on moment where you just had to improvise something?
Yeah, we've had many of those. I mean, it's high school theater, so we're gonna have
Mhm.
plenty. The first one
Yeah.
that I ever really experienced was during my freshman year. I was stage manager for our spring musical Chicago, and one of the lights went out in the middle of the show. The bulb exploded, and so we lost our light, and it was a very important light that was used for a very specific cue, and so we lost that about halfway through Act 1, and we still had to keep going with the show, and we had to figure out how to get the follow spot to light those areas that the light could no longer cover. And then at intermission, we flew in the electric and fixed the bulb, but that was really kind of my like, wow, the show has to keep going, and we have to find a solution to everything.
That's crazy. Like, were the actors aware, or was it just Tech having this like, oh no moment?
The actors, I think, were aware because I think it was the second weekend of shows, and so they knew that there was supposed to be light, but the main actor who was affected did not really, it didn't impact their performance at all, and they just kind of kept going, and then they came up to me later and was like, hey, what happened? Like, I heard a little kaboom type vibe, but yeah, we pulled through.
Wow. And then this actually does work with the next question. How do you keep everything organized, like with cast schedules, cues, props, and people? Do you have any system or hacks of the sort?
I mean, in general, in my life, I write a lot of lists. So, like, I'm constantly writing lists of things to do, or things I need to get done, or things, like, in order of what's most important to what's least important. And that's another thing that I found really, really helpful in terms of stage management and tech, is to always have a pencil and a notepad, because I can just write stuff down as I think of them, and I can come back to them later and be like, okay, we need to make sure this person has this, and this needs to be fixed. And so being able to just write stuff down in the moment, and I've also used my phone, like my notes app, for that as well, especially during tech when I'm just so on the go that I need my hands free.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much how I keep things organized. Just write lots of lists.
And with the few issues that you mentioned earlier, like the lights going out, how do you handle the stress or conflicts while you're backstage?
There's many different ways, and it really depends on the type of conflict that's happening, whether it's between actor and actor, tech and actor, tech and tech, and then also if it's like a physical conflict or a mental conflict or each different type of conflict that we could come across, because it's high school, there's always drama. So every different type of conflict we could come across, we deal with it differently. The best way that I kind of handle it is just by talking to the people involved and talking to them and being like, hey, what happened here? Like, tell me your side, and then I can help and talk to the other person, and then we can get both their sides, and we can usually find a compromise or find some way. But oftentimes, conflicts are just the result of stress, because it's a very stressful thing. And so there's going to be stress no matter what. It just really matters to, like, develop systems that people can rely on, and, like, make sure, like, tech crew and actors knows that I'm here to talk if they need to, or if they're frustrated or want something changed. Because sometimes it's just a small thing as, like, oh, my costume needs to be somewhere else. But it explodes into this big thing because of the stress and the pressure that they feel like they're under. So it's just kind of being there for the actors is what really helps.
So then this is actually important for my next question. Do you see yourself as more of a leader or a problem solver? Or both?
I see myself as both. I think the way that I try to lead is by problem solving and is by being there and being present. Um, and I try not to dominate and I try not to overstep. And so oftentimes the way that I do end up leading is by solving problems as they come up, which is what people have kind of relied on me to do, which is like something that I've been able to do. And it's not something that's super hard anymore. It used to be harder for me because I was like younger, but now like I can solve problems. I can help people take a deep breath and like move forward with their thoughts or their plans without causing lots of chaos.
Hmm. And your experience in stage managing, I think that you probably learned something from all this. So, what do you think is the most important thing that you think you've learned?
Oh well. I've learned so much. I think kind of the most important thing that I already knew coming into it, but it was just so reaffirmed by stage managing was definitely time management. Because obviously, as I touched on before, it's a complicated role and it's a lot of responsibility, and so to be able to balance that in school, in my personal life, in my outside commitments, that was definitely something that I had to learn the hard way during my freshman and sophomore year. And so time management, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned and taken away, just because it's such a necessity, especially in life now, as I'm going into college and as I'm going into like the adult world. Being able to manage myself and my time is definitely a skill that not a lot of people have, and so that's something that I am proud of myself for having.
So then this is also important based on that. Has stage managing changed your view on theater as a whole?
I don't think so. I think I've always been very like technically focused. Like whenever I went to see a show when I was younger, I'd always be like, "Wow, the lights are so cool," or "The set is so cool," or like, "How did they do that?" And so I've always kind of been more fascinated with that side of stuff rather than necessarily like the acting or the performance side. But I do think it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's just kind of strengthened and deepened my understanding of all the different facets of theater and all of the different amazing roles that people play that are so necessary that often don't get recognized.
Mm. And, you know, with all your experience in stage managing, if someone wants to become a stage manager, what advice do you think you would give them?
I would say just kind of put yourself out there and show that you're reliable and show that you can be trusted to lead groups of people, and so volunteer for stuff. Like that's kind of how I got into doing theater, doing technical theater in my freshman year. I volunteered to work on Peter and the Starcatcher, which was our fall play that year, and I ended up being the ASM. And I'd never done anything technical before, and so I was kind of lost, but I really learned on the job. And that was kind of how that I built my reliableness, and I built the trust with Wold and with Tate. And so that's kind of how I proved to Wold and proved to Tate that I was ready for a bigger responsibility. And so that's kind of what I can just say is just put yourself out there and do things that you might think are risky, but because like the outcome is always going to be better than what you think it is, especially if you put in a lot of effort and you put in the time and the passion.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that answers all of our main questions, but I think it's time for some fun questions, don't you think?
Yes, I agree.
So, real quick, what's your favorite show you've worked on?
Chicago.
And then what's the worst tech fail that you've witnessed? Like it still keeps you up awake at night.
With the snake in Puffs, there were a couple of times where it just fell forward during the teacher preview and on opening night. And that was definitely that was a really hard thing for us to manage and for us to figure out how to work.
Hey, it worked out eventually, right?
Yeah.
You run on coffee, tea, or adrenaline?
Tea and adrenaline. I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I do love a good tea, or vitamin water. But adrenaline, yes, most of the time.
And what is one prop that you'll never forget?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. One prop. I don't actually know. I don't necessarily work a lot of times with props. But I mean, the wands from Puffs, those are kind of iconic. just because each
Yeah.
actor had their own, and it was designed for them, and then some of them got to keep them afterwards, and I think that's kind of the most personalized prop we've had at Eastlake so far.
And yeah, that answers all our questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Lou.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And I hope that our audience takes a lot away from this experience.
I hope so too.